All right, everyone, welcome back into another college football props video. Going to be touching on the top prop bets on PrizePicks and Underdog for championship week. We got a pretty decent board, I would say, for championship week. With that, let's go ahead and get into it. And so the nice part about this week is that obviously these teams are all pretty darn good teams, but some of these teams that face each other, which I would say is nice. We get a little bit of a sample set to be able to determine whether or not we like a bet. But two, a lot of these defenses are good defenses. So not only are they good teams, but they're good defenses. But because it's a tighter slate, I feel like the public betting on some of these bets a little bit more is actually driving up some values on some players that shouldn't be. And so we are getting some pretty good under bets. And we'll touch on that here right now. So let's go ahead and start off with this early game. I want to talk about Parker Navarro. I'm assuming that's how you say his name. And the average sportsbook line would have this line set at 18, the projection data at 17.6. Now that's going to be an important thing to call out because the PrizePicks line is set at 20.5. Now, when we look at his game log, we are going to see that he has been playing well recently. Okay, don't like that aspect. But again, the nice thing about championship week is some of these teams have faced each other, and Miami, Ohio, and Miami have played each other already. In that game, Parker got replaced, actually. He played terribly, only had 6 fantasy points in that game. And you look at this Miami, Ohio defense, and they're a defense that ranks out 21st in terms of fantasy points given up to opposing quarterbacks. So pretty strong there, averaging about 17.7 fantasy points given up to opposing quarterbacks. And so when we include that number as well, that Miami, Ohio has also given up 17.7 points to opposing quarterbacks on average, I think that's basically where we are also getting that average sportsbook line. I mean, that's kind of why that line is there. And that's probably why the projection line is there as well. And so I do think we can kind of clearly see that the PrizePicks line is a little bit too high. So let's go ahead and move on into Phil Mafah here, where looking at this, guys, like instantly, the average sportsbook line is the outlier here. I want to call that out because when we have all these data points like this, PrizePicks line, we have the underdog line, we have the projection line. It is important to call out when there is an outlier. So the average sportsbook line is the outlier, but I actually kind of like the under here as well. And so we pull a Phil, and we're going to notice that out of his last 4 games, he has gotten the over in every single game over his last 4. Now, if we go back to earlier on in the season, he has gotten the over full season-wise 6 out of 13 times. So he had been going off earlier on in the season. Now, he does get a more difficult matchup, okay? The SMU has given up very little points. They're the 12th most difficult matchup, giving up 15.1 points, fantasy points to opposing running backs per game. And so that number is going to be under there as well. So it could end up being a tight line. Obviously, touchdowns are a little bit fluky. He scores 2 touchdowns or something like that, short touchdowns. Obviously, that's not going to be great. But all in all, that's going to be a bet that I'm fine getting into. Like, I think that's a solid bet that we have here. And then we're going to go down to Gunnar Helm, the tight end here. We're seeing his fantasy score of 10.5 is a solid bet compared to the average sportsbook line. 11.7. He is someone in the previous matchup was able to get the over against Georgia. 6 receptions in that game, 62 yards, 12.2 fantasy points in that game. And so we're looking at that line at 10.5, given the fact that Vegas really likes that over as well. I'm kind of good getting there as well with that one. And then for what it's worth, guys, we are seeing Nicholas Singleton. I'll get into this in a second here. I'm going to be calling this out more as an underdog bet. It's a little bit higher there. So if we are betting the under there, obviously we want to do an underdog. I'll touch on that in a second. But we've got Lance Legendre, where his over fantasy score is being favored. Now, if we look at what he's been able to do over his past few games, we're going to notice that he's been targeted a decent amount lately, and it has been getting more snaps. And there's a reason as to that. So what we'll notice is that, again, he has been getting a little bit more involved. Targets have been up. Snaps have been up as well. The receiver number 2 got injured 3 games ago. He's still out with a collarbone injury here. And so with that, we have seen him get a lot of targets. 8 targets last week, 7, 9, 7, and 6. So the targets have been up there as well. These 2 teams have not faced each other thus far, which I wish we would have got that sample size to see, because although he is getting heavy targets, he really hasn't had a high reception share. I mean, 6 and 7, obviously love that, but that's really it. I mean, 6 receptions there. Not a consistent high reception share, although the targets have been there, which is encouraging. But on a shorter slate, we can't be too picky. Now, we are getting some other bets that I think are fine, but I do want to call out some prop line differences that we are getting here, specifically with the quarterbacks and specifically with Rocco Beck. So we see his fantasy score here, guys, 17.5 on PrizePicks. I don't mind the over here. And I also don't mind the under on underdog. The other data points, the average sportsbook line would tell us that we should be betting the middle. Okay, the average sportsbook line has it set at 18.23. And if you look at it, he's facing Arizona State. If you look at their fantasy points given up to opposing quarterbacks per game, they average 18.4. So again, I think that's why we're getting that average sportsbook line there. And to me, that's encouraging for us to get a middle opportunity bet there. And so with that, guys, I'm going to give you guys the PrizePicks bet of the day right now, and then we're going to jump on into Underdog. All right, so jumping on into the 9 to 5 PrizePicks bet of the day here, we got a 6-slip bet here that I like. Okay, and I want to make this a 6-slip bet instead of a 5-slip bet. So I tossed in Jalen Noel, who, if you look at his recent games, he's really been struggling to get his over receiving yards. 1 massive game and then 4 just terrible games in terms of his over. Rocco Beck can get his over fantasy score rushing the football as well. So I'm kind of okay with that. And we're just kind of going with those other bets that are really popping up there as strong bets for us on this slate. And so with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and get into Underdog. But first, I want to remind you guys of the promo code that's going on the 9 to 5 website. Take advantage of this, guys. Best value out there already. The 9 to 5 membership is at $10 a month. When you use promo code Keep Cashing, you get the first month for $8. So it's a nice way to go ahead and try it, see if you like it. You most likely will. And this promo code will also apply for anyone that's a returning member as well. So take advantage of that, guys. But now we jump on into the Underdog cheat sheet. And what we're going to notice is a lot of the same bets are popping up as well. But at the same time, we are getting a couple of more bets that are fine to me as well. So let's go ahead and talk about Penn State. Okay, Penn State going against Oregon. It's a fun game. And we got 2 bets here, quarterback and running back, for both under their fantasy scores here that I think are going to be good bets. So first and foremost, Oregon is a tough defense. We know that. On average, they only give up 12.8 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And I think Ohio State's kind of a somewhat similar matchup, and I bring that up because I feel like that's the most comparable matchup, if you will, and I guess you could say against Indiana as well would be, but the most difficult matchup that he's had thus far, and hasn't really faced anyone as difficult, or I would say comparably as difficult, was that Ohio State matchup where he only had 7.9 points. If you look at the difference between Ohio State and Penn State, I think they're 2 and 4 in terms of fantasy points given up to opposing quarterbacks. So again, I think it's pretty similar. I think we could see Drew Allure really struggle in this game here as well. We know he's someone that can rush the football and can score touchdowns rushing the football. Oregon has only given up 1 rushing touchdown and only 212 rushing yards thus far this season. So that would definitely be an outlier if he were to be able to get that over. And on top of that, guys, if they are shutting down the run, I do think Nicholas Singletary to get his under would be a good one there as well. Again, using that Ohio State game as kind of a similar matchup, I think we could be looking at betting his under fantasy score here as well, which is a bet that is currently popping up as the best bet here. And again, with PrizePicks and Underdog, there's a slight calculation difference. Underdog is half point PPR, PrizePicks is full point PPR. So there's a slight calculation difference here, but the fact of the matter is the Underdog line is a little bit too high. We're getting a similar bet there. And then Rocco Beck, I already mentioned, probably a good chance that he does hit a middle. Now, if you look at his last 5 game average, he has been crushing. And so you're not going to like it if you look at the last 5 game average. Let's put it that way. But what I do find interesting here is that the quarterback on the other side of this game is also favored for the under here as well. Now, we're going to see his Underdog line and his PrizePicks line very similar here. Basically, the exact same line, 17.85, 17.5. So no real edge there. But if you look at this matchup as well, ISU gives up an average of 20 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. So interesting there. But I do think maybe this game just ends up being a little bit lower scoring, and that's why Vegas is giving us those lines. We got a plus EV bet here, almost 53% likely to hit. That's okay. And we are getting some other decent ones here. I do want to call it Dylan Gabriel, though. We are seeing another decent prop line difference here. So he does draw a difficult matchup as well in this matchup going against Penn State. It wouldn't be surprising to see him struggle. If you think he's going to have a good game, obviously you'd want to bet the over on PrizePicks. If you think he could struggle in this matchup, you would want to bet the under on Underdog. Worthwhile call out there. One other call out that I want to make here as well is that we are currently not getting some fantasy score lines for some quarterbacks that we might get on Underdog as well, just to be able to better compare. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but obviously that would make us maybe want to make a bet on Underdog instead of PrizePicks. And looking at passing yards here for Parker as well, it's at 145 or 144.5 here on Underdog, and on PrizePicks it's set at 138.5. So decent difference there. I did think that was going to be worth calling out there. For example purposes, 142 against Kent State, hit the middle there. So interesting there. Now, guys, let's go ahead and get into the Underdog bet of the day. I should call, we got one more. Jordan James for under his fantasy score or rush yards, I'd be fine with. You look at Penn State, they've only given up 1 100-yard rusher thus far this season. They're averaging only 3.1 yards per carry as well. So Jordan James, someone that has been pretty good, but this is going to be a much more difficult matchup. If he's not getting over 100 yards as well, I don't think he's going to get to over his fantasy score as well. Those two bets would heavily correlate. So again, getting into the bet of the day here again here now for underdog. It is an 8-slip bet. I don't think you guys have to run on an 8-slip bet if you guys don't want to. It's more fun for me, so I'm doing that with this one. But really, if you guys want to do Penn State quarterback under fantasy score attached to some of those other good bets that are popping up, Singleton, that's actually not going to reduce the payout if you pair them up and then do another bet with that. It's all pretty much fine. If you want to go these three, we could do that. Phil as well. Like, they're all pretty much fine. But I want to show you the 8 top prop bets on the board as it sits right now. If you guys want to take one off, by all means, you could go for that there as well. So that's going to do it for this video. Again, guys, if you guys want to access to any of the tools that you saw in this video, head on over to 905sports.com. Get access to those for just $10 a month. But when you use the promo code KeepCash and get the first month for $8 instead. So that's going to be all, guys. Give a like, subscribe to the channel, comment your guys' favorite bet. If there's one bet that you disagree with, by all means, let us know in the comment section below. All right, thanks for watching. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.